Greetings. Welcome to the session on aging of population in India. In the earlier session, we have discussed about stationary, stable and quasi-stationary population. Now we will discuss about aging of population in India. Geographically, India's position is 7th largest country, preceded by Russia, Canada, China, America, Brazil and Australia. In terms of population growth, India ranks the 2nd position after China. According to the 2011 census, India's population on 1st March 2011 was 121 crores, comprising of 62.37 crores of male population and 58.64 crore female population. Thus, India is the 2nd country in the world to cross the 100 crore mark after China. Demographic transition sheds light on the current rapid population growth, especially in developing countries. Basically, it enabled us to understand the interrelationship between the population structure, fertility and mortality. In this section, let us understand aging of population and the occupational structure in India. In the words of former director of World Health Organization, Guru Raj, the aging of population issues and concerns are an emerging worldwide challenge in the 21st century and need to be addressed on a priority basis. Now, what are the major issues concerning this? We'll have to look into this. Now, according to the United Nations, a country is said to be aging where the proportion of people over 60 reaches 70%. With this basic introduction, let's move on to understand the change in the characteristics of Indian population. As far as the growth of Indian population, it can be divided into 4 phases. The first stage is known as stagnant population. The period is from 1901 to 1921. In this phase, population growth increased by only 1.29 crores. It is quite interesting to note that the decadal wise, if at all we break up this period into 2 census, that is 1901 to 1911, the recorded growth rate was only 5.75%. Since the natural growth rate of population was low, it was about 6.6%. During the decade of 1901 to 1921, which was a decade of famines and epidemics like plague, cholera and malaria, the growth rate of population declined to minus 0.3% and death rates was recorded as 47.2% during this period. Therefore, this year took a heavy toll of human lives and therefore it is referred to as the year of Great Divide. Now, let's look into the second phase of the population growth. This phase is known as steady population growth and the period is between 1921 to 1951. This phase recorded a steady growth of population. During this phase, population increased by 2.8 crores in 1921 to 1931, 4 crores in 1931 to 1941 and further it increased to 5 crores in 1941 to 1951. The recorded decadal growth rate in 1951 was 0.9%, which is less than that in the year 1941. The reason that can be attributed to this is due to the partition of India in 1947. During this phase, the country achieved to steady increase in population because of decline in the death rate from 36.3% to 27.4% and increase in the birth rate from 46.4% to 39.9% over the period. As a consequence, the recorded average natural growth rate for this 30 years was 12.2%. Now we have a third stage which is popularly known as population explosion, and this is the period between 1951 to 1981. Thanks to improved medical facilities, which has resulted in decline in death rate from 22.8% to 15% and birth rate from 41.7% to 37.2% over the period, which paved the way for population explosion in India. This phase recorded a rapid population growth. The population has increased by 32.5 crores as against 12 crores during the period from 1901 to 1951. In terms of average annual growth rate, the growth rate of population increased from 1.25% to 2.2% in the year 1981. The fourth phase, that is high growth with declining trend. The period is 1981 to 2011. This phase recorded a declining trend of population growth. The total population increased by 53.4 crores during these 30 years. In terms of average annual growth rate, it declined from 2.2% in the year 1981 to 1.93% in 2001. Further, we find the similar trend appearing to be continuing in the year 2011. Let us now look into the table that presents the size and growth of population in India during 1901 to 2011. We have a table with 4 columns. The first column is census expressed in years, total population expressed in crores, average annual exponential growth rate expressed in percentages, decadal growth rate expressed in percentages. Let us look into these details year-wise. In the year 1901, the total population was 23.84. We do not have the information pertaining to the average annual exponential growth rate and decadal growth rate. In the year 1911, the total population is 25.20, while average annual exponential growth rate is 0.56, while decadal growth rate is 5.75. In the year 1921, population is 25.13, while the average annual exponential growth rate is negative and the value is 0.03%, and the decadal growth rate is also in negative, it is 0.31. In the year 1931, we understand that the total population is 27.89, while average annual exponential growth rate is 1.04, while decadal growth rate is 11%. When you look at the year 1941, the total population is 31.86, while average annual exponential growth rate is 1.33% and decadal growth rate is 14.22. In the year 1951, the total population is 36.10, while average annual exponential growth rate is 1.25 and the decadal growth rate is 13.31. In the year 1961, the total population is 43.92, the exponential growth rate is 1.96, the decadal growth rate is 21.51. In the year 1971, the total population is 54.82, average annual exponential growth rate is 2.20, the decadal growth rate is 24.80. In the year 1981, total population is 68.33, average annual exponential growth rate is 2.22, while the decadal growth rate is 24.66. In the year 1991, the total population is 84.63, average annual exponential growth rate is 2.14. The decadal growth rate is 23.85. In the year 2001, the total population is 102.70, while average annual exponential growth rate is 1.93 and the decadal growth rate is 21.34. In the year 2011, the total population is 121, while average annual exponential growth rate is 1.64% and decadal growth rate is 17.64%. Before analyzing the occupational structure and aging population, let us understand some basic concepts related to work, workers, and work participation rate, especially in the context of Indian economy. Census of India 1991 defines work as participation in any economically productive activity. In general, it means the work can be of physical in nature or associated with mental or intellectual caliber. It also includes unpaid work on a farm or in a family enterprises. It also includes supervision and direction. Workers can be further classified into main workers and marginal workers. Main workers are those who work at least for 183 days, while the marginal workers are those who might have worked less than 183 days in any given year. Generally, the category of main workers include farmers, field workers, people engaged in household activities, etc. The non-workers can be categorized as people engaged in unpaid home duties, students, dependents, retired persons, beggars, inmates of jails, etc. Thus, from the above classification of workers, we can understand that the total population of the country is composed of working and non-working population. The working population is the labor force of a country which excludes children below the age of 15 years and the old age people above the age of 60 years. Let us now look at the working population in India. According to census 1991, the working population was about 37.64%. Further, out of the total working population, 90.6% were main workers and 9.4% were marginal workers. If we look at their distribution location wise, we understand about 79.2% were in the rural areas and 20.8% in the urban areas. If we look at the gender wise distribution, out of 314.9 million total workers, about 71% were the male workers and 29% were the female workers. The spread of male workers in rural and urban areas out of 223.5 million is about 75% and 25% respectively. Similarly, out of 91.4 million female workers, about 89.2% were in rural areas and 10.8% were in the urban workforce. If we look at the number of main workers out of 285.4 millions, 38.7% were farmers, 26.2% were agricultural laborers, 3.6% were household industry workers and 31.5% were the other workers. So, we understand there was a significant increase in the composition of workers during 1990s. According to 2001 census, the total number of workers in 1991 was 37.6%, but it has increased to 39.3% in 2001. Out of this, 78% were main workers and 22% were marginal workers in comparison to 90.6% and 9.4% respectively in the year 1991. It's clear that during 90s there was increase in the number of casual workers. In 1991, about 35.8% of rural population included main workers and 4.3% of marginal workers. But in 2001, the share of marginal workers increased to 11% and that of main workers increased to 31%. Similarly, the proportion of marginal workers in urban population also increased. It is quite interesting to note that the proportion of main workers almost remained constant at 29.3% of the total urban population in 2001. But quite contrast to this is the proportion of urban marginal workers, which increased from 1% in 1991 to 3% in 2001. If we look at the working population in India, both the main and marginal workers in 2001, it was about 402.5 million, out of which 58% were engaged in cultivations or as agricultural laborers and 4.1% were in the household industry workers and 37.9% were the other workers. Before we move into the other topic, let's look into the understanding of this particular session today. The summary of the session is, according to Manu Dharma Shastra, the lifespan of an individual is divided into 4 stages or ashramas, namely Brahmacharya, Grihasthashramam, Vanaprastham and Sannyasashramam. The growth of an Indian population can be understood in 4 phases, namely stagnant phase, steady population growth, rapid population growth or population explosion and high growth with declining trend. According to Census of India 1991, work is defined as participation in economically productive activity. In general, it means the work can be of physical in nature or associated with mental or intellectual caliber. It also includes unpaid work on a farm or in a family enterprise. It also includes supervision and direction. Workers can be further subclassified into main workers and marginal workers. Main workers are those who work at least for 183 days, while the marginal workers are those who might have worked less than 183 days in any given year. Generally, the category of main workers include farmers, field workers, people engaged in household activities, etc. The non-workers can be categorized as people engaged in unpaid home duties, students, dependents, retired persons, etc. The following are the questions to check our progress as how much we have learned from this session. The first question is, describe the chronological phases of population growth in India. Explain what is meant by population explosion. Compare and contrast the mix of main and marginal workers during 1991 and 2001. What is the meaning of Great Divide? Give an account of 4 phases of life of an individual as given by Manu and explain its relevance in the context of Indian economy. For further reference, you can look into the books by title Basic Demographic Techniques and Application by K. Srinivasan, Indian Economy by Mishra and Puri, Indian Economy by Dutt and Sundaram, or you can also look into the Population Policy for India by P. K. Chaubey. Thank you.